Hey, Kath. I'm coming to you live from Norwich, New York. The purpose of this video is to show you the paperwork organization of the LLC in addition to the accounting. I'm sending you out Excel files attached to an email with the accounting through the end of February. It's even going to include the beginning of March, but I just got paid from Denise, who's a BURAF tenant, last night for the partial February's payment. She's behind, and all of March's. So she's now current, but I just got that last night, so I haven't included that in the accounting at this point in time. So that's one additional thing. But I thought what I would do is go through and show you the files. I can't afford to come to New Jersey right now, and I can't get out of New York State with this horrendous weather we're having. So I wanted to get this to you as quickly as possible. What I really wanted to do was just come back to New Jersey after I came down in December, but it's not going to happen for a little bit. All of this stuff is available for your inspection. All of the receipts, as I go through this, you'll see every cent is accounted for from the beginning of this. This video is going to be kind of choppy, and I'm not going to do any retakes or anything, so I have to take these friggin' glasses off because they're giving me headaches. So I'm just going to start. This is the LLC organizational file, and in this file it has all of the documents, copies of important papers for the corporate minute book, which I'm required to have a corporate minute book, and I do for the LLC. The organizational file itself, which includes the IRS filings and tax election for a pass-through tax entity, and the articles of organization, and we have a publication requirement in New York State for the wonderful opportunity of owning your own business and being a slave to the state of New York. They also make you publish it once per week for 6 consecutive weeks in 2 newspapers, and that costs a few $100s. The NBT accounts, both of our bank accounts are at NBT in Norwich, and what I did is I opened 2 accounts. We never had that before with the partnership. One account is an escrow account, and that has just security deposits in it and no other money. And the other account is the operational account, which is the checking account. And there's 2 components to that, and I'll explain it. And then it gets into, if you can still see that file, copies of the deeds and anything that's required for the organization. So that file is here. That's kept in my home office in Norwich. The backup documentation is kept in my real estate office in Berlin. Then there's the operational account. This file it's got the time and billing in it, basic forms, copy of any critical documents. So at a moment in time, if you ever needed to put your hands on the LLC, so to speak, you just go into this file, and this is where everything is. It's also got the current NBT escrow statements, and this is all fiscal, and the fiscal operating statements, the checking account statements, and the disbursement journal statements, and any internal correspondence. So anything to do with the LLC fiscally is in this one. Organizationally is in the other one. And then I have 2 other files, and this is the Madel property file. Anything to do with that particular property in a fiscal year is in here. You can see the word fiscal here. This has all the receipts for Madel. It has, well, we have a new service. I'll get into that later, but there's a new electrical service job that we have to do over there, and it's got a file in there for it. We have to update the electrical service there. The garbage that we pay, the receipts for that, the water bill that we pay, the receipts for that, the taxes, fiscally, all of those receipts, the landlord policy and payments, everything's in there, and then the 2 tenant files. So including, well, I don't have leases for, hang on, I gotta do something with that. I have a lease for the person that I had rented to on the 2nd floor of Madel. Sharon never gave me the leases or the lease for the downstairs tenant, so I have no lease for that. But I do have a file for them and any paperwork that I've had going on. So each tenant has their own file. It's by property. I've separated it. So that's the Maydol one. And then the other one is the Burrav property. Again, this is the fiscal file. And in the main file, it's got all the sub-files. It's the mirror image of Maydol. It's got the Burrav receipts, the landlord policy. Burrav actually has a flood policy where Maydol doesn't. And so it's got the flood policy information in there, the taxes, the water, the garbage. There's actually a NYSEC one in here, but it's just a notification to NYSEC, a letter letting them know the change in ownership of the property. There's nothing in the file. And then it's got the tenant I rented to and her lease and all her information. And then it's got the tenant that Sharon had rented to, but again, she wouldn't give me a copy of the lease, so I don't have the lease. All I have is I made copies, just so you can see this. Everything that comes in terms of rent is photocopied. So there are the photocopies of the checks for all the months, and if I gave them a receipt, if they had paid me in cash and I gave them a receipt, the copy of the receipt is there. That happened to be kind of a blank one, because there was nothing that I needed for it. There's a receipt that I had given him earlier when I first took things over. So there's that. Even with Denise's file, she lives with her son and his partner. So there's 3 people living there, and they each pay their own third of the rent. So not only do I photocopy each of the checks, this is from, this is her son, there's the partner's check, and then she pays in cash, and I even photocopy the cash coming in, so everything is documented. And so anything that would need to be known about Burrav is in that file. So there's 4 files for this organization. And now there's an additional file, but it's only a tax file, and I'll get into that kind of quick. On the front of the file is the outstanding bills. Right now we've got a water bill for Maydol at $269. It's a quarterly bill. And we have the last, finally, of the tax bills. The taxes get paid again. In New York State, we pay taxes 3 times on each property per year. So in January, March, and October. And so this is the March taxes. On Maydol, it's $479.28 we have to pay by the end of this month. And on Burr, it's $541.42. So those things still have to be scheduled and paid. Inside of this file is the escrow. I already sent this information to you in an email, but the escrow amounts and how they were calculated. Maydol, it shows the 2 tenants and what their rent is and what the escrow amounts are. So for Maydol, we have to hold for both tenants $1,762.50 in escrow, and for Burrav, it's $2,100 even. So the escrow account has to be maintained at $3,862.50 for both properties, and we do have that in the escrow account. Finally, one of the things that you had mentioned in one of your, it was either the text or the email, is that you didn't understand why we couldn't have immediate cash flow, and that is one of the reasons, is because Sharon didn't have to make up an escrow account because you received the security deposits from the tenants, and that's partly where that money had gone. As a sidebar, let me shoot over to that real quick. I never got an accounting from Sharon, and I never got a chart of accounts, and that was one of the things that took so long to put this stuff together, is because I had to rebuild the entire thing. I don't know what she wrote off as expenses, 179 expenses, or depreciating, the Marx rules. I have no idea. I did finally get, just this past week though, the copy of the final partnership return from her accountant. And I have not gone all the way through this, and to be honest with you, even going all the way through it, I'm not sure I'm going to understand everything. My accountant is H&R Block in Norwich, and all I do is hand them information, and they file the return. I don't know what they do for depreciation. There were a couple of things in here that didn't make a great deal of sense to me as I thumbed through it, and I've got to sit down and meet with H&R Block when I'm getting ready to file the tax return for the LLC. and figure out where we go from there. So there's that. Let's see. All right. Then for the accounting file, I have got summary statements which are being emailed to you for both 2013 and 2014. 2014 obviously isn't complete because it's March. But I did January's and February's are complete and they're accurate. March is only half complete because I just got the second part of that payment last night for the rent, and I'm just not going to sit down and redo this accounting at this point in time. So there's a little bit more money in the account than what this shows. But this is a summary statement on Burr Ave, and what it does is it breaks it down by month, and it shows January, February, March, April, and so on all through the year. And then it goes by the Schedule E expenses, and it shows per month what the expenses were charged to which account. And then the first column is the summary, which is the running total at any point in time that you print this off. And so I have one for Burr and I have one for Maydol. And these are spreadsheet programs. I input each of the expenses or the income in there by month. So it's by property, it's by month, and it's by fiscal year. Let me thumb through this. I should have had this sitting out here. Oh, this is the expanded view of that, where not only do you have the summary sheet, but you also have every month is broken down, and it prints it off, and it shows in the top the income, which are the rents, and then it shows any of the expenses for that month. And that's January's, that's February's, and it goes right through. So every year has a print off of 13 pages. The summary sheet and the property expenses for each of the 12 months times 2 properties. So 26 sheets for each accounting year. Let's see. And then this is 2013, and this shows the profit from last year. It breaks it down again by property. The LLC was filed, well, it was sent for filing for the Department of State on September 18th, because that is the date of the closing. That was the dissolution of the partnership. So this begins in October, and it shows the expenses, the income and the expenses coming in and going out. For Burr Ave, we had a net, well, this is before taxes, so I guess you can't call it a net profit, an adjusted gross profit, whatever the hell you call it, of $2,100.44. And we had a loss on Maydol of $102.36. And part of that is because what's not calculated in Maydol for the 3 months, what's not shown on this sheet, is the cash accounting, which is the disbursement journal. It's part of the operating account, and the $575 that's paid by one tenant is shown in there, and I'll get to that. But otherwise, all the income is shown here, and the expenses are in there. I paid taxes in October. I paid the big tax bills in January, and I have scheduled the third round of taxes now to go out. Then in the month of September, the partnership was still going, and Sharon was doing the final accounting for that month. And so she had the books, and I obviously never had access to the books, and she didn't have access to these books, so we were each running our own books as we eliminated one company and started another. So one of the other things you're going to be getting is what's called the transition journal, and that's the journal for just that month. It starts at the beginning of September, although it wouldn't actually technically start till the 18th, but I was already doing things in anticipation of getting this partnership resolved. What it shows is that Sharon, it starts with her final accounting. When she closed out the checking account, she gave me a money order from the partnership for $138.29, and so that begins this operation, and it's accounted for there. And then the interim security deposit and the Tortorelli rent that ended up going out toward expenses The O'Donnell rent went to you, the security deposit, in addition to the other tenants' security deposits, in order to make up the $3,000 check that I delivered to you in August. So this shows the money that went in, the expenses that have come out of there for that particular month. And then once the LLC started its first operating month, which is October 1st, then we get into the 2013 disbursement journal for there. And you can see when I showed you the Maydol rent thing before on that Excel spreadsheet, it didn't show these 3 rents coming in because they're in this. They're funding this disbursement journal. So there's the Tortorelli rent from October, November, and December. So all the rents have been accounted for. And then in 2014, I've got to take this out because this is a 2013 file, but just for showing you what this is, 2014, I still keep the same disbursement journal. It does the carryover from 2013, so January 1st, it shows the opening balance from the previous journal and carries that amount in, and then the Tortorelli rents start coming in to fund this, and then the expenses come out. The Tortorelli rents now, which is the second floor of Maydol, are actually going into the operating account at this point, and it will be this point forward, so there will be no more funding of that disbursement journal. So when we run out of cash in there for miscellaneous expenses, what the disbursement journal does is I can't write off as an expense my own time for doing anything. So anytime that I do work for the partnership, it's not it's a deduction, but it's not an expense. Owners cannot write off their own time, so that's where that comes from. So I just wanted to create an accounting for it. This is the NBT operating account, and it starts, the first statement date that we have is 10/31, and the end of the month, they send them out the beginning of the next month. It shows the income going in, the breakdown of the income, and I've done this differently now. But the first month, I put everything in one lump sum, and then I wrote down on the NBT statement whose rent it was that made up the lump sum. Then I found that to be kind of confusing. And what I've done now is what I do with my other company, which is I'll go to the teller window, and every tenant has a different deposit. So Denise's deposit would be separate from Yacarino's, which would be separate from Tortorelli's, and so forth. So that anybody looking over this after this point in time would be able to tell what the deposits are. But the first month I didn't do it that way. I just threw everything in. Then it shows the expenses coming out, the check numbers, and I have actually gone through these statements and I've written down what the expenses are, which you'll see the receipts in a few minutes, and the receipts back up all the expenses. So on each one of these statements, all the income and all the expenses have the notations of what they are written down on them. They also have check marks. The red check mark on there means that it's in the accounting, and every one of these income and expenses have been accounted for, and it's in the accounting. So that's that one. This is the escrow account, NBT statements, and again, this is the 2013 period. So there's October's, November's, and December's, and you can see that I had to build up the escrow, which creates more problems because the money that went into this escrow, which is security deposits, because it was taken out of rents coming in, also means that it was retaxed. So not only did we pay tax on it to begin with, because all security deposits are taxed anyway in New York, I assume they're taxed everywhere, as income, and then they're expensed on the way back out. Kind of a silly way of doing it because it's really not income, but it's what we have to do. This computer keeps fading, that's why I have to keep pressing that button. So this, I took part of the Barrows rent payment. This is the operating account. There's part of Barrows. $360 went into the operating account, and the $240, the balance of it, went into the escrow account to start building up the escrow account balance. So there's a $240 addition. There's a $675 addition, and I put Barrows in there completely. What I've done since this month is I no longer put the deposit in the escrow account. I put the entire deposits in the operating account and then transferred them online because I think that made more sense. so that it shows, it's just neater. It shows the income just going into one account, especially since we're being taxed on it. It's just not something I thought of until then, because I'm not an accountant. But the money's in there. So at the end of December, we had $915 in the escrow. And as I said, now we have the $38,6250. So the escrow account is complete. So there's that. Then we get into the accounting. This is the 2013 accounting. The 2014 accounting isn't going to be done yet. I have most of the receipts entered, and that's been sent to you up through the beginning of March. But clearly the accounting, I don't have it as organized as this is now, because this is ready for the accountant. This is the summary sheet that the accountant is going to get. It shows the income and expenses coming in. It's the same summary sheet as I showed a few minutes ago, except this one has the backup of every month. The first 9 months of this are blank because we didn't have the business then. That was taken by the partnership. So once we start getting into October, the income and all the expenses are there, and it's written out in detail. And every sheet is a different expense, so these are the 13 sheets. And this also shows Denise paid her rent. She paid it late there, the 22nd of the month. It shows what she paid for cash. It shows what they paid for checks. And I gave her a handwritten receipt, so the receipt is copied on here. Every month has a separate piece of paper associated with it. I take a copy of the check. The copy of the check for rent also goes in the tenant file, so that each of the tenant files is as complete as the accounting. And then I also took copies of the deposit slips, so it shows that the money went in the bank. And so every month has the checks, and every month has the deposit slips. Oh, I got somebody at the door. Hang on.